I have with me here Kent Duston, who is the co-convener of the Save the Basin campaign, as well as a number of other Wellington societies, and he has spoken tonight about what happens in transport in Wellington, particularly what is happening with our road of national significance in the Wellington area. Can you just tell us what were the key points of your presentation tonight?
Well, the key thing is that the road of national significance is due to run from Levin all the way through to the airport, and the Minister, in this case Stephen Joyce, wants to build effectively a 4-lane highway running all the way through the length of the Kapiti Coast, over Transmission Gully, and all the way through to a second terrace tunnel to a flyover around the Basin Reserve, and then a second Mount Victoria tunnel all the way through to the airport. Now, this is a $1.4 billion investment, but unfortunately it makes no economic sense. It's due to lose round about $400 million before cost overruns, and in the land of constrained carbon emissions and peak oil, we think it seems like an amazingly bad investment. So each of these projects stands on its own by itself, but unfortunately none of them make any economic sense for New Zealand. Now, in the way that all of this works, it's deeply entwined with transport policy in New Zealand, which is all about fostering roads in favour of instead of public transport, and it's really that skewing of investments that's causing all of these issues. The way that those are resolved is really through the political process. The Minister is focusing on building roads in an era where building more roading capacity is not really a good investment for New Zealand, but the only way to unwind that is not through logical argument or anything similar. It's through the political processes. So both at the local government level, electing councillors who are going to do a much better job with public transport, and at the national level of electing a government that is going to be a bit more responsible when it comes to carbon emissions and peak oil, and whether these investments make any sense for New Zealanders in the decades ahead.
So you've given us an outline of what you see the key issues are and where in the national and the local level people can get involved. What you spoke about earlier tonight was about what you and your wife are doing in a personal capacity to reduce your carbon emissions, and I'd like you to be able to share just how in a personal capacity you can impact on transport emissions.
Well, this is, I guess, where carbon emissions and climate change become very personal rather than being a matter of government policy or anything similar. So my wife and I decided a few years back that what we would try and do is constrain our transport and household emissions to 1 tonne of CO2 per person per annum. So between the two of us, we have 2 tonnes of CO2 to live on. And we view a carbon budget in much the same way that we have a money budget. So with the same way that we all only have limited financial resources, we've worked on the basis that we only have limited carbon resources. So for our car, for instance, that means that if we're to stick within our carbon budget, we can only drive the car 5,000 kilometres a year. And that means we have to make some conscious choices about getting in the car and going any place, because if we want to go away in the car on holiday, then that means that we're going to have to think about whether we can use the car on a day-to-day basis. So we've changed electricity suppliers, so we're now consuming zero carbon electricity. We're looking at whether we can change the gas hot water into solar hot water. All of those things impact on your carbon emissions, and it's a very, very concrete way of making a difference for your carbon emissions and really making a change as far as climate change is concerned.
So, well, one last question. We've been focusing at the local and personal level, and you talked about choices and transport choices. If you were Transport Minister, what kind of choices would you make, and how would you make those trade-offs?
Well, I think the thing that I'd do is reflect the economic reality of the difference between public transport, which is in the public good, and roading investments, which are largely restricted to being in the private good. And I would rebalance those things to say, well, if we subsidise roads, we should also subsidise rail. If we want, or conversely, if we want rail to stand on its own, as the minister's just announced, then we should expect that roads stand on their own as well. And so the major change that they would make compared to what the government's doing at the moment is just treat these different modes equitably. So if there's value in getting somebody to work, if there's economic value in that, then there's the same economic value if they walk to work, or whether they take a bike, or whether they get on the bus, or whether they drive their car, or whether they take a train, and start treating all of those different modes as though they all have the equivalent economic value to New Zealand.